You know what I haven't really done in a while? Checked up on Silent Hills. I mean, it's Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro. Those two must be up to something really crazy. I mean, I saw PT, it was really good. Let's check on up and see what's going on with those two. What happened? Well, that looked like it ended quickly. Silent Hills has been canned by Konami after a falling out with Hideo Kojima. And, that sucks. That's really disappointing. I was kind of hoping that we would see some return to form for mainstream horror games, but it looks like we're going back to action shooters all the time, like Resident Evil 6, you know, fucking horror game. I hate this game! You know, fans of real mainstream horror like myself, people who love the old games like Silent Hill, Resident Evil, and Clock Tower, and Dino Crisis, they've been hoping for a real good game to bring the horror back to the mainstream, that classic horror feeling. And I think for a lot of us, that's what Silent Hills was supposed to do. But, unfortunately, that's not going to happen anymore. But the last couple of attempts at bringing horror back home into mainstream development have really kind of fallen flat. My case in point here, The Evil Within. Directed by Shinji Mikami, the godfather of modern survival horror and the creator of Resident Evil, and developed at his studio Tango Gamesworks. Published by Bethesda Softworks, this game seemed like a slam dunk. Even the early trailers had people spooked and excited. I believe the technical term is fear boner. The Evil Within had some pretty heavy press, and the boys from Bethesda, Maryland wanted us to believe it was the second coming of Chris Redfield, the dawn of a new age of grim dark horror, and the end of a long reign of action shooters with occasional stupid jump scares. But like basically everything Bethesda puts out that isn't the Elder Scrolls or Wolfenstein, this game is kinda mediocre, and serves really to highlight a lot of the problems horror purists like myself disliked about how survival horror has been treated recently, over the last couple of years.
You mustn't fight it. This is for your own good.
No. Stop.
The Evil Within attempts to recapture a bygone era of horror games, circa the late 90s and early 2000s PlayStation and PlayStation 2 spooks, where your character is controlled like a tank. Fortunately, it does away with the tank controls in the name of not making me want to kill myself, which I'm pretty thankful for. It actually accomplishes this goal, but really in name only. The game feels somewhat hollow to these old PS1 era classics, wearing them like a drape, but not really holding any real depth to them. The Evil Within opens with you, Detective Sebastian Castellanos, whose last name literally means Spanish. He is Sebastian Spanish. He is joined by Joseph, his partner, and Julie Kidman, another detective whose shirt always seems to be a different shade of see-through. The three of them are called out to the local mental institution to check things out, as there's been a report of multiple homicides. So they head inside to find the game's primary antagonist, Revik. And it seems like a regular teenage boy. Oh God, what happened to face? After this little sequence, our hero wakes up hanging upside down in the hospital meat locker, where our game actually begins. You know, the hospital meat locker. I gotta put that meat somewhere. I mean, what, they're just gonna leave it around? That's fucking weird. What the hell hospitals do you go to? That's weird, dude. That's weird. As Sebastian, you have access to the usual bundle of tricks for your survival horror character. You can sneak around all sneaky-like, get some stealth kills, which are weirdly powerful, but not really effective against all enemies. You have a melee attack that's really only effective against motionless boxes. And of course, you're allowed to use a small arsenal of weapons, from your revolver to shotguns to eventually rocket launchers, and all of them are upgraded with... Is that guacamole? You use the guacamole you find around the world to upgrade Sebastian Spanish's abilities. I'm kind of starting to sense a theme here. You can upgrade things like health, skills with various weapons, or carrying capacity. And those are the basics! You employ these abilities against a variety of enemies in all sorts of fun environments as you navigate your way to the nightmare. With all of that out of the way, though, let me get into what The Evil Within does really well. Now, as the game progresses you through levels chapter by chapter, there's no really cohesive zones or hub world. In fact, levels just sometimes throw you somewhere completely random halfway through. This would usually be pretty jarring if not for the effectiveness of the transitions. The flow from one area to another through cutscenes or slow transitions is actually really well done. And this is all owed to solid level design. Most of the areas you explore have multiple paths, and lots of little secrets hidden about, so you get some extra ammo, or some gear, or a little bit of extra guacamole for leveling up. This is really great and a really good reason to start exploring zones, as, you know, with all survival horror games, ammunition tends to be pretty scarce. The atmosphere is another area this game makes the spooks. Or tries to. The atmosphere is certainly oppressive, not quite enough to be spooky on its own, but enough to build a world that feels hostile. This is accomplished through fantastic visual design, excellent sound design, and a general gory and violent world. If you can find a level outside of that psych ward in your head that's not covered in blood, I'd actually be pretty surprised. The gameplay controls are also fairly tight and responsive, making the frantic combat at least somewhat enjoyable. They're not quite to the level of The Last of Us, despite that they use almost the same style of combat. They are competent, though, and when you have a lot of ammo and are equipped for an actual fight, it can be pretty enjoyable to blow through some zombies. All of these things together would make for a pretty fun game, and they really do. The Evil Within can be enjoyable at times when it lets you go nuts and explore its environments and encounter enemies in the way you want to encounter them. It's challenging, and the levels are gorgeous. When you weigh it against some of the cons, though, it's a good game in theory, but it becomes a pretty mediocre game in practice. So first part is the story. What the fuck is going on here? The story falls back on itself and convolutes over and over again, trying to one-up the last twist it threw at you, constantly insinuating new information and trying to get you into a headspace where you have no goddamn idea what's going on. And it worked! You did a really good job. I'm not sure if I've gone crazy or not when I'm watching this story unfold before me, because it makes literally no sense. You got this anime villain here, apparently we're all in his brain, and it's fucking weird. There's a mirror world, which might be the real world, might be the fake world. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on here. This kind of kills the game for me. The context of my actions is so muddled and ridiculousness that by the end of the game, it just doesn't matter. The story is convoluted and ridiculous. The same goes for the pacing. The game developers made some really weird choices on how the game decided to be paced. How certain moments are supposed to feel. Sometimes, just weird. It's out there. But it's also something I can sum up in one section. Immediately after completing the first chapter of the game, you're served up to this cutscene, in which you and your party, missing one of your members and having discovered two more, race through a city as it falls apart. This scene has nothing to do with the main story of the game. All it is gratuitous eye candy. We're watching buildings fall over, everything's rearranging itself, everything's fucked up, but it serves no purpose to the game. And it's almost 3.5 minutes long. 3.5 minutes where you are out of control. You cannot control your character during this point. All you get to do is watch as they drive around the city. If you have to keep this scene in, at least make it interactable. At least make it a quick time event for all I care. Give me something to do during this scene instead of watching a bunch of people I don't care about in a city that I don't give a fuck about. Have a bad day. Gah. This kind of pacing comes up time and time again throughout the game, showcasing and highlighting a lot of really odd moments in the story. One of the other issues I have is with mini-bosses. Now, the standard boss fights are actually pretty good. I mean, fighting whatever the fuck that thing is, you have to lead it into some incinerators. It's not about shooting the boss, it's about leading her around and dodging her and activating the right traps at the right time. It's actually really fun. But a lot of the mini-bosses in between those, on the other hand, are bullet sponges. They serve no purpose but to absorb all of your ammo. Even the regular enemies take 2 to 3 headshots to kill. And those are the basic enemies. Mind you, you pretty much fight those throughout the entire game at increasing levels of durability, but, you know, it's just really annoying to have to waste 3 bullets on one person. Now, this wouldn't be as much of an issue if there wasn't another thing that's so very welcome in survival horror games: forced combat sections. You are required to kill most of these monsters and bosses to progress. And when bullets come at a premium, it kind of makes them into ammo sinks. And these are more frustrating than they are tense. To be fair, you can usually use the environment in certain places to help conserve ammo, or utilize stealth where the enemy doesn't see you coming. There are those sections, though, where you don't have access to environmental abilities, and you don't have access to stealth.
Let's go.
These sections are just a pain in the ass. You can't get around them through guile of your own. You are literally just somebody running around a room with a gun, praying the next enemy you kill drops ammo. That's not fun, it's not tense, and it's not scary, it's annoying. These kinds of facets, like the twisted and convoluted and very stupid storytelling, combined with forced combat on limited resources, in a very uncreative and boring way, drives the fun of the game down from something that could have been really great to something that's really stupid and boring. At best, you got a mediocre experience with the occasional spook. At worst, you got a boring slog through some pretty environments. But the most egregious of all of the crimes this game commits against you is the fact that it's simply not scary. Is the game disturbing and off-putting? At times, it absolutely can be. But there's nothing here that really drives the fear home. There's the occasional jump scare, and the environment is nicely oppressive, but it feels more like Clive Barker's Jericho than Resident Evil. And that's not a good thing. Clive Barker's Jericho is fucking terrible. This is fucking terrible. Have you played that game? Don't! Save yourself the goddamn trouble. A lot of these problems could have been resolved just by using smarter enemy placement. More choice on how you can approach a situation instead of forced combat. And maybe some more creative enemies in general that didn't just take one bullet. Maybe quicker enemies or something like that to make it more challenging without turning them into bullet sponges. Instead, we're fed an increasingly durable feed of the same zombies with the odd unique monster in between. I'm sure they tried to combine these mechanics to build tension and panic, but they just come off as boring and uninteresting. Like Silent Hills before it was canceled, before The Evil Within came out, it seemed like a beacon of hope to horror fans. It's an old-school horror game, headed up by the godfather of horror himself, Shinji Mikami. We were so hopeful that this might harken back to the olden days and give us a game that we could really enjoy. Instead, we got a mediocre Resident Evil ripoff. It was fun, but it could have been so much more. While they managed to really nail the atmosphere of the game, it's very oppressive, and the level design on their open levels is fantastic, they'd kind of missed one of the major core concepts of a horror game, actually being spooky. Throughout my entire playthrough, I was only really spooked maybe once or twice by the odd little jump scare. But really, I felt pretty comfortable throughout the entire thing. And I played most of it at 2 in the morning in the middle of the night. So, you know, I wasn't cheaping out like some sissy boy playing with all the lights on in the afternoon. And that's sad, because I still get scared of some parts of Ocarina of Time. Seriously. Getting the song that changes it from day to night, I can't remember the song name right now, those fucking Redeads scared the shit out of me. And still do. I'm in my late 20s. They still do that. Well, hello there, and thank you for watching my video on The Evil Within. After Silent Hills got pulled, I wanted to take a look back at this guy, the other great hope for a classic survival horror game. And it's unfortunate that both of these games have turned out to be disappointments. Maybe we've got a future. I mean, this guy could set up to be a good franchise. But, man, the other way, I get totally English, I swear to God. I appreciate you watching my video through. You're awesome. If you enjoyed this, please give me a subscribe. It is a big deal for me. I would love you forever. And, yeah, thank you very much, and you have a fantastic day. Wait, you've never heard of Dino Crisis? It's like fucking Resident Evil, but with dinosaurs. It's developed by the same guy. It's amazing. Stop the video. Go find a trailer for it. Watch it. Come back here. Tell me awesome. It's so good.